The flame is blue at 4 in the morning. Not orange, not red. Blue. A cold electric blue that burns along the cracks in the rock with a quality that looks less like fire and more like something escaping from beneath the world. This is sulfuric flame, the combustion of gas seeping from the throat of a volcano, and it is, by any reasonable measure, one of the most beautiful sights the planet produces. A man walks toward it, carrying 2 woven baskets on a bamboo pole across his shoulders.
He is not here for the beauty. He has seen the blue flame thousands of times. It no longer registers as wonder, only as light to work by. What he is here for is the sulfur itself, the yellow mineral crystallizing along the crater's edge, heavy, valuable, and lethal to extract. He will fill his baskets. He will climb out of the crater. He will carry 90 kilograms of stone up a slope steep enough to break a man's resolve, through gas that has already broken his lungs, for a wage that will not, by any calculation that matters, compensate for what this work is taking from his body. And tomorrow, he will do it again.
This is not adventure. This is not the territory of summit photographs and conquered peaks. This is the other story that altitude tells, the one where the mountain is not a goal, but a workplace, where the volcano is not a bucket list destination, but a job site, where the climb is not measured in personal achievement, but in kilograms carried, baskets filled, days survived. The carriers of the sky, working where the air itself is trying to kill them.
There is something worth pausing on before the descent begins. Most extreme environments are extreme in a passive sense. The cold of the Arctic does not seek you out. Thin air is simply an absence. The crater of an active volcano is different. It produces something. It exhales gas with intention, in the loose sense that geological processes have intention. And that gas is actively, continuously working to damage the body of anyone who breathes it. To work inside such a place, day after day, is to maintain a relationship with an environment that is not neutral toward you.
The men who work there have found a way to coexist with that opposition, not by defeating it, but by learning its rhythms closely enough to survive within its margins. There is a crater in East Java that breathes poison. Kawah Ijen sits at the summit of a volcanic complex in Indonesia, its caldera holding one of the largest and most acidic crater lakes on Earth, a turquoise body of water so corrosive that it could dissolve a human body in a matter of hours, kept liquid not by ordinary geothermal heat, but by a continuous infusion of sulfuric and hydrochloric acid rising from the volcanic vents beneath it. Around the lake's edge, fumaroles vent sulfur gas at temperatures exceeding 600 degrees Celsius. When this gas meets the oxygen of the open air, it ignites, producing the blue flame phenomenon that has, in recent years, drawn photographers and tourists from around the world who climb partway up the crater rim at night, take their photographs, and descend by morning. The miners do not descend by morning. The miners are still there. What the tourists photograph as a spectacle, the miners process as raw material. The volcanic gas, when cooled and condensed through a network of ceramic pipes that the miners themselves maintain, deposits liquid sulfur
that pools and hardens into a deep, glossy yellow stone. This stone is what the men of Igen have come to harvest, not for its beauty, though it is, in its way, beautiful, but because a chemical company at the base of the mountain will pay for it by the kilogram, and the price has not meaningfully changed in decades, while the danger has only compounded.
The descent into the crater is approximately 3 kilometers each way, much of it across terrain so unstable that a wrong step sends loose volcanic rock sliding toward the acid lake below. The air near the active vents contains concentrations of sulfur dioxide that exceed, by a significant margin, what international safety standards would consider survivable for unprotected exposure. The miners wear no respirators of the kind a chemical engineer would require. Most carry a length of wet cloth, sometimes a cheap gas mask purchased with their own wages, held against the mouth and nose during the worst of the gas surges, a defence so inadequate against hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide that it functions in practice as a psychological comfort more than a physical one. They breathe the gas anyway. There is no version of this job that does not involve breathing the gas. A miner's load, once filled, typically weighs between 70 and 90 kilograms, more than the miner's own body weight in many cases, balanced across a bamboo carrying pole on a single set of shoulders, for a climb that gains several hundred meters of elevation across loose, sharp volcanic terrain in a single, uninterrupted ascent. Most men make this round trip twice in a single day. Some, driven by the unforgiving math of piece rate pay, attempt it 3 times. The lifetime exposure accumulates in ways that medical researchers who have studied the Igen miners describe with a specific grim vocabulary: chronic bronchitis, accelerated lung deterioration, skin lesions from acid exposure, spinal deformation from decades of asymmetric heavy carrying. The average working life of an Igen sulfur miner, according to studies conducted in the region, is measurably shorter than that of the surrounding agricultural population. A quiet, undramatic shortening that does not make headlines because it does not happen all at once. It happens one breath, one basket, one mountain at a time. Why do they do it? The answer that visiting journalists are usually given is some version of, there is no other work. The agricultural land in this part of East Java cannot support every family that needs supporting. The sulfur company pays in cash every day, without the delays and uncertainties of seasonal farming. For a man with children to feed, the volcano's poison gas is, in the brutal arithmetic of rural poverty, a more reliable provider than the soil. What the brief answer does not capture is the specific psychological adaptation that occurs in men who have done this work for years. The miners of Igen speak of the crater with a familiarity that strips away its mystery entirely. They know which sections of the rim are stable and which are not. They know the particular smell that precedes a gas surge, a smell that a tourist, encountering it for the first time, experiences as terrifying, and that a 15-year veteran experiences as information, the way a sailor reads an incoming weather front. This is what extended exposure to extremity does to the human mind. It does not eliminate the danger, but it converts the danger from an emotional event into a technical one. The fear does not disappear. It becomes data. There is an economic structure underlying this work that explains why a job this hazardous persists in an era when the dangers are well documented. The miners are paid by weight, not by hour, not by risk undertaken. This piece rate system, inherited from colonial-era mining practices and never substantially reformed, places the entire calculation of how much danger to accept directly into the hands of the worker. A miner who carries 70 kilograms earns less than one who carries 90. The system does not force anyone to take the larger load. It simply makes the safer choice also the poorer one, and lets each man decide, every morning, exactly how much of his future health he is willing to trade for today's wage. This is perhaps the quietest form of danger in the entire chain. Not a falling rock, not a gas surge, but a payment structure designed decades ago by people who never once descended into the crater themselves. Here is the question that sits unanswered at the bottom of every photograph of the Egen blue flame. The tourists who climb partway up the rim at night are seeking an experience. The miners who descend the rest of the way at dawn are seeking a wage. Both are drawn by the same mountain, the same gas, the same impossible blue light. But only one of them gets to leave when the photograph is taken. What does it mean that the most beautiful natural phenomenon either group will ever witness is, for one of them, simply the smell of work? High in the cliffs of central Nepal, there is a tradition that predates written history. The honey hunters of the Gurung people have for generations harvested wild honey from combs built by Apis laboriosus, the Himalayan giant honeybee, the largest honeybee species on Earth, which builds its enormous combs not in trees or hives, but on the sheer overhangs of cliff faces, hundreds of meters above the valley floor. The bees choose these locations precisely because they are inaccessible to most predators. They did not anticipate humans willing to descend on ropes made of twisted bamboo and rattan to reach them anyway. The hunt begins with smoke. Fires are lit below the cliff, and the smoke is directed upward toward the combs to disorient the colony, though disorient is a generous word for what amounts to provoking tens of thousands of bees, each capable of a sting more painful than that of common honeybees, into a defensive frenzy directed at the climbers descending toward their home. The climber descends on a rope ladder, often hand-woven by the hunting party itself from local plant fibre, lowered from the cliff top by team members whose only equipment is their own strength and the trust of the man dangling below them. There is no safety harness in the modern sense. There is no backup system. The rope is the entire margin between the hunter and a fall of, in some locations, more than 300 meters onto rock. Reaching the comb, the hunter uses a long bamboo pole, a tango in the local terminology, to cut sections of the honeycomb free, which fall or are lowered to waiting baskets below. Throughout this process, the bees attack. The hunters wear minimal protection, traditional clothing, sometimes a woven hat, rarely the kind of full-body bee suit that a Western apiarist would consider essential. Stings accumulate by the dozens, sometimes the hundreds, across a single hunt. The honey they harvest, known regionally as mad honey, for the psychoactive compounds it contains, derived from the rhododendron nectar the bees forage in spring, commands a price in international markets that can exceed conventional honey by a factor of 10 or more. This economic reality has, in recent decades, transformed what was once primarily a subsistence and ceremonial practice into something closer to an extraction industry,
with middlemen, export contracts, and mounting pressure on a smaller and smaller number of practicing hunters to produce more. The skill itself is dying. Younger generations in these communities increasingly migrate to cities or take other work, viewing the honey hunt accurately as one of the most dangerous traditional occupations remaining anywhere on Earth. The men who still practice it are, in many villages, older, and the knowledge of which cliffs hold which colonies, of how to read the wind for smoke placement, of how to weave a rope ladder that will hold a human body's weight across a 300-meter fall, exists now in fewer minds than at any point in the tradition's recorded history.
But when the last honey hunter of a given village retires or dies without a successor, the cliffs do not become safer. They simply become unvisited. The bees continue their work, building combs on overhangs that no human will climb to again. A door that took countless generations to open quietly closes. There is a detail about the rope itself that is easy to overlook. The rope ladder is not a tool that is purchased or certified by an external authority. It is woven by hand by the very men whose lives will depend on it, using techniques passed down with the same oral precision as the knowledge of the cliffs themselves. A hunter does not trust a stranger's rope. He trusts a rope made by someone whose own life has, at some point, depended on the same weave, the same knot pattern tested across generations of use. This is a fundamentally different model of safety than the one most of the world relies upon, where trust is placed in certification bodies and institutional accountability. Here, trust is placed in lineage, in the unbroken chain of hands that have made this exact object in this exact way and lived to make it again. There is something contained in the honey hunter's practice that the volcano miner's work does not share. Ceremony. The hunt is preceded by ritual, by offerings to the cliff spirits, by a formal request for permission that frames the danger not as labor to be endured, but as a negotiation with something larger than the hunters themselves. The mountain, the bees, the ancestors who first attempted this descent and either succeeded or did not. Is this ceremony a form of psychological protection, a way of making the unbearable bearable through meaning? Or is it something else, a genuine belief held by people who understand this cliff more intimately than any biologist ever will, that the descent is not merely physical, but spiritual, and that the rope holds not just because of its tensile strength, but because permission was properly asked. On the steep slopes of Darjeeling and Assam, in the high tea gardens of northeastern India, a different kind of vertical labour unfolds every morning. Tea does not grow on flat, convenient terrain. The varietals prized for their flavour, the high-grown teas that command premium prices in markets from London to Tokyo, flourish specifically at elevation, on slopes steep enough that mechanical harvesting equipment cannot operate. The terrain that produces the world's finest tea is, almost without exception, terrain that resists the modern agricultural machine, which means the harvest remains, as it has for nearly 2 centuries, a matter of human hands and human balance. The pickers, overwhelmingly women, in a labour arrangement whose gendered structure traces back to the colonial tea estates of the 19th century, work the slopes in lines, moving sideways across gradients that would challenge a hiker's footing even without a woven basket strapped across the forehead and resting against the back, slowly filling with the day's pluck of leaf and bud. The work requires a specific, practiced selectivity. Only the topmost leaves and bud of each plant, picked with a precise pinching motion, repeated thousands of times across a single shift, while the body maintains balance on a slope that offers no level ground, no flat resting point, for the duration of an 8 to 10 hour workday.
The dangers are not the dramatic, photogenic dangers of a volcano crater or a 300-meter cliff. They are slower, more insidious. The cumulative strain of repetitive motion on a body working at an unnatural angle for decades. The risk of falls on slopes made slick by the very monsoon rains that make the tea grow so well. The exposure to pesticides in estates that have not modernized their safety protocols. The respiratory and joint conditions that emerge not from a single catastrophic event, but from the simple accumulated mathematics of 40 years on a slope.
A tea picker in Darjeeling will, over the course of a career, walk and climb a cumulative distance roughly equivalent to ascending Everest dozens of times, not in a single dramatic expedition captured by a camera crew, but in the unremarked, unrecorded, daily accumulation of an ordinary workday, repeated across decades. No one photographs this. There is no blue flame, no honeycomb hanging from a cliff, no immediate visual drama that would make a tea slope compelling footage for a documentary about danger. The danger here is precisely the kind that the modern attention economy is least equipped to notice. Slow, cumulative, undramatic, and entirely real.
There is a particular irony worth sitting with here, because it connects this labour directly to the lives of the people watching this very film. The tea that emerges from these slopes, packaged, branded, sold with images of misty green hillsides and the language of tranquility, is consumed by hundreds of millions of people who have never once considered the body that picked it. The marketing leans almost entirely on serenity.
The actual experience of producing it is the opposite. Repetitive, physically punishing, and economically precarious, performed largely by women whose wages have failed to keep pace with the rising market value of the product their bodies make possible. Few industries have so successfully converted grueling physical labour into an aesthetic of calm. Perhaps this is the most important category of vertical danger that exists, the kind that produces no viral photograph, no single moment of cinematic peril, because the harm is distributed across thousands of ordinary days, rather than concentrated into one extraordinary one. If a danger cannot be captured in a single frame, does it count as less dangerous? Or have we simply built a culture of attention that can only register risk when it announces itself with drama, leaving the slow erosions, the cumulative tolls, the deaths by 1,000 repetitions, invisible by design? There is a particular dignity in labour that the world has decided not to watch. The miner descending into Egen's crater at 4 a.m. is not performing for an audience. The honey hunter dangling above a 300-meter drop is not seeking applause, though if you ask him, he might describe what he does in terms closer to duty than to courage. A duty to his family, to his tradition, to the specific cliff his father and grandfather also descended. The tea picker, working sideways across a Darjeeling slope at dawn, has never once thought of her labour as extreme. To her, it is simply Tuesday, the same as it was yesterday, the same as it will be tomorrow. This is, perhaps, the central paradox of all vertical labour performed at the edge of human tolerance, The people doing it have almost universally stopped experiencing it as extraordinary. What looks from the outside like a feat of endurance and nerve that few humans could replicate is experienced from the inside as simply the shape that a particular life has taken, the mountain you were born near, the trade your family has always practiced, the only economy available in the place the world happened to put you. We are drawn to images of human beings at impossible heights because something in us recognizes, correctly, that what we are seeing exceeds the ordinary boundaries of what bodies are supposed to do. The volcano miner's basket should be too heavy. The honey hunter's rope should be too thin. The tea picker's slope should be too steep for an entire lifetime of repeated ascent. And yet, basket after basket, descent after descent, slope after slope, they do it anyway. Not because the mountain has made them fearless, because the alternative to climbing has never, in any practical sense, been available to them as a choice. There is one final thread connecting these three forms of vertical labor, one that has nothing to do with geography and everything to do with time. Each practice exists at a specific moment of vulnerability. The eGen Mining Company has begun discussing automation that would eliminate the need for human carriers, even as the men currently doing the work depend on it for survival today. The honey hunting tradition is contracting generation by generation, the knowledge held by fewer hands. The tea estates of Darjeeling face climate shifts, threatening an industry whose logic depends on terrain too steep to mechanize, remaining productive. In other words, all three of these vertical labors may, within a single generation, simply cease to exist, not through liberation, but through the quiet economics of obsolescence, rendering the labor unnecessary. When that happens, the men who carried the baskets and the women who picked the leaves will not be remembered as having been freed from extremity. They will simply be replaced, the way every form of human extremity throughout history has eventually been replaced, not because the world decided their suffering mattered, but because it became eventually more efficient not to require it. This is worth recording before it happens, not as nostalgia for danger, but as testimony that these hands existed, that this shape of human endurance was real, carried up 1,000 mornings by people whose names will not appear in the histories of the industries their bodies sustained. The blue flame still burns at Kawa Ijen this morning, as it has burned every morning for longer than anyone now living can remember. A man is walking toward it, with 2 empty baskets across his shoulders, the bamboo pole creaking slightly under a weight that has not yet been added. By the time the sun rises high enough to dim the flame's strange and terrible beauty into something more ordinary, he will have filled those baskets. He will have climbed the 3 kilometers back up through gas that has been quietly shortening his life since before he can remember choosing this work, to a scale where his labor will be measured in kilograms and converted into the day's wage. He will do this again tomorrow. The mountain does not notice. The mountain has never been required to notice. It simply continues breathing its blue fire, holding its acid lake, indifferent in the specific way that geology has always been indifferent to the small, determined, exhausted creatures who have decided, for reasons the mountain will never understand and was never asked to understand, that this is where their lives will be spent. The hands that hold the sky do not hold it for glory. They hold it because somewhere below, in a village the mountain cannot see and does not care to, a family is waiting,
for what those hands will bring down.